Okay.
Hey, all right? Glad to see you. Yeah, I'm glad to be on. I was down in bed.
Good afternoon, and welcome to our Glendale City Council workshop. This meeting is for council members to review and discuss important issues, projects, and future council meeting agenda items. It's a work-study session only and allows the council to hear input from city staff. No action will be taken at this workshop, and there will not be an opportunity for public comment. This meeting is streaming live on Glendale's Facebook and YouTube pages and the city's cable television station, Glendale Channel 11. Thank you for joining us.
And good afternoon. Welcome to Glendale City Council Workshop Session, June 11th, 2024. The meeting is called to order. I'm not going to call attendance roll call because everybody's here, so if you would take note of that. With that, Ms. Barger, can you go ahead and introduce item 1?
Council committees, mayor and council, it's that time of year we need to make appointments to the Government Services Committee. Our current members are Councilmember Malnar, Councilmember Clark, and Councilmember Tolmachoff. All 3 are eligible for reappointment, and all 3 have requested reappointment. So if there's council consensus on the reappointment, they will be reappointed for another year.
Questions? Consensus?
No, I'm good.
Okay, there you go.
Thank you.
Well, why don't we just mess around here and go to item number 2?
Council item of special interest, short-term rental code amendments.
Good afternoon, Mayor, members of the council. Here to provide staff report this afternoon is Rick St. John, Deputy City Manager.
Good afternoon, Mayor, members of the council. We're here today to talk about short-term rentals. This is a council item of special interest from Councilmember Tolmachoff. Flagstaff and Sedona, to put it succinctly, Flagstaff and Sedona adopted a couple of new provisions to their ordinance that Councilmember Tolmachoff asked us to look at. So the new provisions will be lined out in the PowerPoint presentation. You've probably seen them in your reviews of today's workshop. We'll look at each one separately, and if there's consensus individually, we can go that route, or overall consensus, but we are seeking consensus today on these amendments to our short-term rental ordinance. The first is a neighborhood notification requirement. This would require a short-term rental owner or manager of a short-term rental to notify the adjacent properties in the neighborhood that they are a short-term rental and plan to operate as a short-term rental. So they have to provide the account number issued by the city, the rental address, and then the emergency contact information for who a neighbor can call if there's a problem at the home. It has to be delivered, hand-delivered, or by certified mail with receipt, and then they have to attest to the city, that's subsection C, that they've completed that prior to operating as a short-term rental. And then subsection B states that if you make any changes to the contact information or contact person for the short-term rental or any other provision, that you then have to do the notifications again and then send another attestation letter to the city letting us know that you've done that. The next, yes, sir.
Is there a question? I don't think your mic's working.
And now the mic's on?
There you go.
Okay. On the neighbor notification requirements, so it's adjacent plus across the street, directly and diagonally. So that's additional. What about behind them? If they're adjacent, adjoining, I can understand that, but what if there's an alley? Would they be required to, I mean, it's not exactly adjacent if there's an alley, but I can see that the short term could influence neighbors, behind them.
Mayor, Councilmember Turner, in the language that describes the ordinances that were adopted by Sedona and Flagstaff, it talks about if you have an alleyway behind you or if there's a little strip park or something like that, you still have to notify the properties directly behind and diagonally behind the short-term rental. Okay. And I imagine we would adopt the same language in describing how you come into compliance with this section of the ordinance.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mayor.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. Mr. St. John, so I know when I brought it up and I met with
there's a committee in Arrowhead Ranch that's been working on, they've got quite a number of short-term rentals there. Last I saw it, it was a yet to be determined distance behind the property, because some of the properties are lakefront properties. And so I don't know, and some of them are channels, so it's not a long distance to the house across, and some of them it's a wider distance to the house across. So I don't know, is it going to be a yet to determined, or are we going to say if it's 100 feet, 200 feet, or whatever? If it's across a whole golf course, you still have to notify the neighbor behind. So I don't know if we're gonna figure out if there's a distance where it's so far that you don't have to notify the neighbor behind.
Mayor, Councilmember Tommelchoff, I think, I know what you're talking about, and you're right, it was a yet to be determined distance, and I think where Sedona and Flagstaff landed, if memory serves me correctly, was 200 feet, and that seemed reasonable, particularly if there's a lake behind you, because water carries sound pretty easily, and so we would want that notification.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next is occupancy rates. So under compliance with laws, which is an existing section within the current ordinance, we would add subsection number 2, occupancy limits will be in accordance with the adopted International Fire Code, as may be amended from time to time. And then for this council's benefit, and then any community members that are listening, it's currently 1 person per 200 gross square feet of floor area. And gross square feet includes everything within the property. So it includes even the width of the wall, for example. So it's not livable square feet, it's gross square feet of the property. And then the final item is some new definitions and more clearly defined prohibitions. The 2 that we're talking about are event center, which currently does exist in the ordinance, but there's no definition of an event center. So we've included a definition here. And then pop-up store. And a pop-up store is simply getting into a short-term rental for the purpose of just selling a product for a very short period of time. So it may be pumpkins because it's Halloween season or something like that, but we would prohibit pop-up stores. So we would add pop-up store to subsection B1B, where you see it in red, and then we would define it in the definitions. Those are the amendments that are being proposed today, and again, happy to answer any questions about any of the 3, but we are seeking consensus today on approval of all 3 or any of the 3.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. I do have a question on the event center. Some of the short-term rentals, I mean, I don't have actual firsthand knowledge, but I know sometimes a home's rented to maybe to have a wedding or something like that. So that would be considered an event, right? Under
Mayor,
our
Councilmember
ordinance?
Tommelchoff, yes.
And then
that would be prohibited.
the 200 square feet would apply to the number of guests that you're allowed.
Mayor, Councilmember Tommelchoff, it would apply to the number of people residing in the home. So if the wedding party, let's say the bride, her family, rented the home as a short-term rental, they would be the residents staying within the home. The occupancy rate they would have to meet the occupancy requirement. If they then had a party and invited other guests, whether it was a wedding, a reception, or what have you, provided they're not renting the home for the sole purpose of just having the wedding. So if they get the short-term rental, but they stay in a hotel, they go to the rental just to have the wedding, that would be prohibited.
Okay.
But if they stayed in the home and then had an event as part of their stay, that would be allowed.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Mayor?
Go ahead.
Mr. St. John, this then calls into question for me as to whether or not each of these should have a maximum occupancy established. And I would like us to consider that as part of our regulation. Even though there may only be 5 residents, if they are hosting a wedding or a party or something else and there's 200 people that come, that's going to be a much different burden on the neighborhood. So I think all of these rentals should have a maximum occupancy established for them like we do for any other business. Thank you.
Question?
My question's for Councilmember Turner, if I could, or Mr. St. John, I guess. How would you, it would depend on the size of the property too. I mean, you can accommodate, you know, in a large home on a large lot, you can accommodate a lot more people than you can in a regular residential average, whatever, 2,000 square foot home on a, you know, a 6,000, 7,000, 8,000 square foot lot that's completely different. So I don't know. I mean, we have the nuisance parties is already included in our ordinance. So I think as long as they're not creating a nuisance, I feel like it's, you know, and they're following everything else in the ordinance, that they wouldn't be violating anything other than just a lot of cars parked there. And they wouldn't be creating, as long as they're not creating a disturbance or violating our ordinance, I personally don't think there should be a problem with it.
Mayor, Councilmember Tomlichoff, Councilmember Turner, obviously I understand both points. I think operating under the nuisance party statute or ordinance that's been adopted by this council is probably the easier path, because I'm not sure how we would figure out maximum occupancy of the entire property. But if you set a limit on the maximum occupancy of per 100 square feet of property, I'm also not sure how we would enforce that, other than if we got called because of a nuisance. Of the nuisance ordinance, correct.
Well, Mayor, if I might, I would still like to see us consider that, and maybe it needs some more thinking. As I admitted, it was off the top of my head based on the conversation we were having, but just as, I mean, somehow we have to establish the square footage of the structure. We can't go directly, probably can't go directly to county records, because I think that's based on livable square footage, not under roof or however else we're going to determine it. So each of those are going to have to be determined individually. And so at the same time or same manner that's being determined, we could determine, if we want to, the total area of the property or something like that. But I think it's smart up front to tell that the property owners who are leasing these out short term, that they know that there's a limit as to, you know, how many people can be expected. And then if we do have a call and code or officers go out, they have a number that they can deal with that's not arbitrary. It's standardized across all of, you know, the city, and say, no, sorry, you're exceeding the maximum occupancy for this property. Because it also, and I think we've seen that in our daily crime reports, that some of these parties get awfully big, and then it can become an issue of how quickly, in the event of an emergency, could people who are attending safely exit the party. So I think it is a health and safety concern, in addition to the burden that it places on the neighborhood. You know, so enough said. I think we ought to keep it under consideration, or establish today whether there's a consensus to establish some aspect of that in our code.
Lauren?
Thank you, Mayor. Oh, did you say me or?
Lauren,
Okay, thank you. So,
you're next.
Councilmember Turner, part of this amendment establishes occupancy already, maximum occupancy. Yes, it does. On slide 5, occupancy rates. You're talking, so a guest and an occupant are two different things,
I agree.
right? So the occupant is somebody who's staying at the property and occupying the property for one night or longer, and a guest is not an occupant. Is that right, Mr. St. John?
Mayor, Councilmember Tomlichoff, that's correct.
So, I mean, I would like to just move this ahead, and if Councilmember Turner wishes to bring forward another amendment to the short-term rental ordinance to talk about, I don't know how you would do it, but establish some sort of rule about the number of guests, not occupants, because I think you're referring to guests, not occupants. And at a party, not the people who are renting the home, but the people who show up to a party or a wedding or whatever at the home.
If I may, I'm referring to the combined number of people who are residing in the property overnight, in addition to any guests or other people that might be on it. And I don't mean to quibble over the term of occupant versus something else, occupant, guest occupant, but I mean, I'm using the term maximum occupancy the same way we do for a restaurant. And those people don't stay overnight, but they're considered occupants. It's the number of people that can be within the property at any given time. And that's where my concern lies, whether there is guests, there is employees hosting, serving beverages or whatever else they might be doing at an event in the backyard, as well as those that are staying overnight. I think we need to have a maximum occupancy of all of that for each of these locations.
Mayor, can I respond to that?
Sure.
Thank you. So I think that's still a different issue than how many people, the person who's renting and the people who will rent the home, when that'll be one of the things they'll have to understand is that you can only, as occupants, as either that are on the contract, 200, whatever it is, one person for every 200 gross square feet of the property. And if you want to limit the size of an event or the amount of people, that would vary depending on how big the home is. There's a lot of variables there. I still believe that's a completely separate issue than how many people you're allowed to rent the home for. Like if it's a 4-bedroom home and it's whatever, my home, I just looked, my home would be maximum 11, which would be a lot of people in a house my size. But, I mean, a lot of places are set up for that, as short-term rentals. They've got, multiple bunk beds for kids. One of the other things I wanted to ask, though, is does a child counts as an occupant? Is that right?
Mayor, Councilmember Tomshoff, yes.
Okay. So I still think we're talking about two different things, because maximum occupancy for the rental is different than maximum occupancy. Not everybody that rents a short-term rental is having an event or a party there. A lot of people just rent them for family reunions and vacations and things like that. So I'm happy to have a conversation about that, but I believe, and I don't know whether Mr. St. John would agree or disagree with me, I think those are two different things, though.
Mayor, Councilmember Tomshoff, I think we all agree that there's people staying in the home. That's occupancy is defined in that section, but then maximum occupancy of a property for an event, similar to the sign that's on the wall behind Councilmember Turner, use a lot of the same language. But if I may offer a solution, right before the meeting here today, I was talking to Randy Huggins, who told me that there's a new bill being signed into law by the governor that deals with short-term rentals, and there are some changes to the short-term rental state law. So I will be looking at that new bill with probably Ryan Lee, Haley, Barry, and Development Services to see what, if any, amendments we need to make even after, if today's amendments go through. There's going to be another iteration, I think, coming through probably in August for your review. We can include what council member is talking about in that study and bring something back in August, to his point, and still proceed if the council desires on the 3 amendments we're talking about today.
Thank you, Mayor. I would like to move forward as this is written. I believe we're getting into the weeds when we start to talk about things like occupancy rates, which is going to be very flexible. In my house, I could have 15 occupants and then an unlimited number of guests for some kind of event. So right now, let's get our foot in the door, let's get this passed, and if there are any suggested changes, then staff might find going down the road that there needs to be some subtle changes to it. We can consider those at this time, but I simply don't want to get so detailed and so encumbered that it becomes unworkable. I'd like it to go through just as it is. Thank you.
I was just thinking about Joyce's house, her having a fishing contest with her koi pond. I've been listening to both sides, and there's merit on both sides. I think when I look at my situation, if the people that have asked me could they come to our home and have a wedding, because I have a gazebo that I had put up in the back. If they did that, there very likely could be 100+ people at this wedding for a couple hours. Now, they're not renting my home, and they wouldn't be renting my gazebo, but I've got a large, really large backyard. So to me, it is two different things. I don't think we should be looking at visitor occupancy nearly as much as occupancy that are renting for short-term rentals, the way it's written. I would support it the way it is right now, but I'd also would really like to kind of really maybe pay more attention to the visitor occupancy and see if this is something that maybe we're gonna have to correct down the road. The beauty of what we do is we can always change it. It's not locked in, so if we see that we didn't quite fix the problem, we can always tweak it and add another amendment to it. But right now, I'd be supportive of the way it's written. Anyone else? Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. I, too, would be in support of moving it forward today. And if we do bring it back in August to discuss this topic, I would like to know about occupancy for residential. I've never heard of residential occupancy. I've only seen commercial. You know, the fire department goes out, they evaluate a business, and they say this is the max occupancy of this building or this office. But I've never seen that for residential. Do we want to go there? Is my question. Has this ever been done elsewhere? I would be reluctant to move forward on something that really is kind of a private property thing, and I wouldn't want to move forward if that's the case. Thank you.
Okay, do we have a consensus as written?
Thank you.
Okay, all right. City manager's report.
No report this afternoon?
City attorney's report. No report. Council items of special interest. Councilmember Baldenegro. You have any?
No, sir.
Thank you. Councilmember Clark. Thank you. Councilmember Milner.
Nothing today.
Thank you. Councilmember Tomachak.
Nothing today, Mayor.
Thank you. Councilmember Turner.
Not today, Mayor.
Thank you. Vice Mayor.
Nothing, Mayor.
Okay, and I guess I'll go ahead and screw it up, and I don't have anything either, so. Can I get a motion to go into executive session?
So moved.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, vote aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, vote nay. We're in executive session. Meeting's recessed.